There is a concept in Kaballah that says that in order for there to be a world, God's light, which is infinite, had to be removed, because wherever God's light is, nothing else could have an identity. For everything is a function, an expression of God's infinite light, infinite wisdom, infinite will. There is nothing that could exist on its own as a separate entity. In order to do that, God removed the light and concentrated that light into one point, which allowed there to be what is called a mokim poni, an empty space. The nature of this empty space and this removal, which is called the tzimtzum by the Ari, became a matter of controversy among the Kabbalists a century later. What did the Ari mean that God removed his light? Did God remove himself? Was there really a place outside of God, outside of God's light, that existed independently? We know that the Torah says, Bereshis bara Elokim, and God created at the beginning of space and time. He created a real existence. We are a true and real existence. Otherwise, there would be no reward or punishment. And our efforts to do good would be meaningless because it's not a real existence. And so, controversy erupted among the great scholars of the Kaballah. There are those who say that the tzimtzum was real. God actually removed God's self and his light from the world. And there were those who said, no, God is nothing physical. The concept of tzimtzum is a physical concept. And a physical concept, a physical removal, could only exist with something that's physical, that takes up space and exists in time. But something that doesn't have any space, you can't remove it from anywhere. It doesn't take up any space at all. Well, this argument erupted in full bloom a century and a half after the Ari passed on, almost 2 centuries later, between the giants of Hasidus and the giant of the Lithuanian community known as Hagoin Rabbeinu Eliyahu, known as the Gra of Vilna. The Gra was of the opinion that God actually removed God's self from the world. Now, how is it possible? The world is physical, God is not physical, doesn't have any physical qualities. And the Gra said, very simple, God can do anything. Chassidus, the Hasidim said that the tzimtzum was real only relative to our existence. It was not real or literal relative to God. And not only did the Alter Rebbe say that the tzimtzum, the contraction, was not a real contraction as far as God was concerned. Not even God's light could really be contracted and limited. For God's light is unlimited, just as God is unlimited. And so, what exactly took place with the tzimtzum? So the Rebbe gave an example of a great teacher wanting to give a lesson to some children. The great teacher was a genius with a relatively infinite amount of knowledge. If he were to begin lecturing to the children the way he thought, well, they couldn't take anything he had, because everything he had was so wondrous and so detailed and so deep. And so he had to stop thinking on his level. Now, when he stopped thinking on his level, it was as if he didn't know anything. Did he really not know anything? Did his brain go away? Of course not. It's still there. It's just that he stopped thinking about it. He did not focus on it but rather allowed it to go into the background so that he could assess the range of the students and what they could receive. And that is the concept of tzimtzum, that even while the teacher could tell a story of a fox going into a vineyard, or a fish in the water, or a story of two friends on a mountain, two brothers on a mountain, even while he was telling that story, he knew the secrets of that story, and he knew how it related to everything else he understood and knew. And so too with God. God's tzimtzum, concealment, was only in his light. God's light is still infinite, and it still surrounds us. It's just that we don't notice it. It's become concealed so that we can exist on our own. We can be expressed on our own. We are a real existence, but relative to God, we still are part of God's infinite capacity. There is no difference between our existence, the angels, the souls, the spheros above, and the infinite light of God. Everything is part of God's infinite capacity. And so we had two schools opposite each other. One school saying that the world was outside of God. God was not in the world. God just observed the world and gave us reward and punishment accordingly. And the other school that said God is everywhere, in everything, at all times, and our job is to reveal God in this world. And the first school, the school of the Goyim, said we have to leave this world because this is a world that's outside of God. We have to go above the world. We must elevate ourselves and sanctify ourselves through the Torah mitzvahs in order to reach Olam Haba, the world to come. And the Hasidim said, the purpose of this world is to bring God's light into this world, to utilize the world, to be happy, and to bring God into our existence, becoming part of us, with us, in a way that we sanctify everything for God's glory. In one doctrine, you leave the world and separate yourself from the world. The other doctrine is, you're in the world, you sanctify the world by the Torah mitzvahs, by constantly doing more and more mitzvahs and learning more and more Torah and spreading the presence of God through the knowledge of God, through the Hasidus. And this, to this day, is the distinction between my antagonist and myself. I believe that God is here. My sins are my own, but God is here in this world at this very moment with my mitzvahs and my non-mitzvahs. My antagonist says, God isn't here. God is outside the world. I have to leave the world in order to reach God. You make up your mind.